Depo Talk, Depo Talk. Another topic broken down on Depo Talk. Wonder what it could be. Let's check in with Jan and Rosalie.
Welcome to Depo Talk with Veritext principals Jan Ballman and Rosalie Kramm. Each episode looks at a deposition or proceeding-related topic of the day through the lens of two industry veterans with over 80 combined years of experience. And now, without further delay, we are on the record. Take it away, Jan and Rosalie.
Hello, good people. Welcome to Depo Talk. I'm Jan Ballman, and I'm coming to you from Minneapolis.
And I'm Rosalie Kramm, coming to you from San Diego.
Rosalie, we're about 2.5 years into this remote legal proceedings realm. You'd think by now we'd have all of the kinks ironed out, yet judging from the number of requests we continue to receive from reporters through Veritext's complimentary webinar and CEU series who are asking for help with regard to how to handle these wonky remote exhibit issues that continue to plague these proceedings, well, it sure seems like the struggle is very real.
You know, Jan, I have reporters reaching out to me for advice on a weekly basis on how to particularly specifically deal with exhibits in that remote setting.
And you know, there's some great electronic exhibit management tools out there for attorneys. I personally love Exhibit Share. I might be a little biased, but when attorneys take the time to invest in one of these exhibit tools, the exhibit sharing process usually goes pretty smoothly. However, a lot of attorneys, as we all know, are not doing that. And instead, they're just kind of winging it, which I think has everything to do with why exhibits in the remote realm continue to be such a pain point for court reporters. So now, Rosalie, you just mentioned that you're hearing from reporters on a regular basis, reaching out to you for help and advice. A lot of reporters look to you for that. For those who may not know Rosalie, as you can see, she's a highly credentialed court reporter. She has over 4 decades of industry experience. She's held a multitude of high-level leadership positions over the years, and she's still out there with her machine weekly, some weeks daily. So she's a working reporter. But I think Rosalie is probably best known for her passion for helping reporters, perhaps most famously for all the blogs she wrote, probably numbering in the hundreds that have been read by thousands of reporters over the years. So Rosa, I think you're basically the Dear Abby of court reporting. So as someone who is always looking for ways to make court reporting easier and someone who loves to share these ideas with her peers, I'm wondering if you've developed any thoughts, tips, tricks, hacks that you might be able to share today with our friends with regard to how to avert some of these electronic exhibit disasters that seem to be just lurking below the surface of every remote proceeding, just waiting to drive reporters crazy.
Yes, Jan, when this subject came up, I really thought about it and came up with 7 ideas or tips that I would love to share with court reporters on how I'm learning or how I've started to deal with these issues. So the first one is having a conversation with the attorneys. Before a deposition begins, when I'm inviting the different participants into the Zoom room, I figure out quickly who is the noticing attorney, and I will ask politely, how do you plan on sharing exhibits today? And if they say, oh, I'm going to be using screen share, I make sure I set the security so they're able to do that. They might say exhibit share, and I always have a second computer open because I love to look at the computer, or excuse me, at the exhibits as they are. And then I also invite them to perhaps practice a little bit how to screen share if they seem a little bit nervous.
That's a great opportunity to help them, kind of lead them where you want to go and help them along, which I do believe attorneys really appreciate when you can tell that this might be their third, remote deposition. And with our many, many more, we can be a great resource for them. So I love that one. That's great. What's number 2?
Number 2 is what I call the big PDF. After a deposition, the attorneys send you one big PDF and say, here are the exhibits. And sometimes it's not obvious where an exhibit begins and ends because there's no Bates numbering, there's no pagination. And so the attorneys are looking for me to go through the transcript, I suppose, and try to figure out where exhibits begin and end, and it's not always very clear. So in that situation, I do send that big PDF back to whomever sent it to me and say, please separate the exhibits for me, because I use the reason I don't want to accept any liability as far as where they begin and end. And the truth of the matter is I don't also want to waste my time looking through trying to figure out where the exhibits begin and end, particularly if they weren't described very clearly in the record. So I sent them back that PDF and I asked them to break out where the exhibits actually begin and end and send me separate exhibits as opposed to that one big PDF.
Gosh, I wonder if that stems from their experience with the in-person depositions where attorneys just kind of leave the room and leave the stack of exhibits behind for reporters to go through and organize and make sure they're all there. Not making excuses. I know it's really annoying, but I do love the verbiage of not wanting the liability. That's really a good one. That's super helpful. Rosalie, what's tip number 3?
Okay, number 3 is another thing that sometimes attorneys have been doing in this remote setting is they will send exhibits 1 through 5, let's say, that were marked. And so obviously they were marked during the deposition, but then they start sending other exhibits, 6, 7, 8, 9, documents that were never identified or talked about or marked in the deposition. So I will reply to that attorney and say, I thank you for exhibits 1 through 5, but there is no 6, 7, 8, 9. Sometimes the attorney will write back and say, well, I really wanted those to be exhibits in the deposition. And I will write back and say, well, I'm sorry, but I believe I'm only allowed to index and identify the exhibits that were actually identified and marked during the deposition. I'm not going to be able to add 6, 7, 8, and 9. If you want those documents to be attached for whatever reason, I invite you to ask counsel if they would stipulate to that. But at the same time, I'm not going to take it upon myself to be adding exhibits to a transcript. And if I do ask them to invite counsel to stipulate to something, I always try to give a date certain, because I don't want to be getting back exhibits the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th day, or waiting and chasing exhibits because I invited them to do something and they're not complying. So that's what I do when they send the extra documents that they're hoping will be exhibits in a transcript.
And that is super wonky, as if we can just randomly add those. But I do like your verbiage and also your advice about the date certain. I've noticed the same thing and use that trick too, to just give them a time by which if we don't hear back, we're going to go forward presuming everyone's in agreement, because it basically then kind of disallows that silence being a legal strategy to be able to say, well, I never agreed to that type of thing. So that is a great one, Rosalie. I love it. What do we have for number 4?
Well, number 4 deals with the mechanics, and I'm sure all of the court reporters out there have a system by now of organizing exhibits. But what I do is I set up a file folder on my desktop, and the moment that the exhibits get to me, I populate that folder with those exhibits. I rename them Exhibit 1, Exhibit 2, Exhibit 3. I'm careful not to name them in different ways. For instance, Exhibit 1 and then Exhibit NO.1. So that helps production out. That's what I understand. And I rename them because a lot of times the attorneys will send the documents with whatever their in-house naming protocol might be. And so to simplify everything, rename it Exhibit 1, Exhibit 2, Exhibit 3, put it in that folder, and they're ready to go into the portal or to send to production when the time is right.
Gotcha. That kind of harkens back to Girl Scout and Boy Scout days and the importance of being prepared and organized. That still matters today because being efficient saves time, and time is money. So that makes it valuable. So that's a valuable one, Rosalie. Very good. What else do you have?
So along the same lines, now that the exhibits that we're getting are electronic, it's so easy to search through them. So when I do populate that file folder, I will have those exhibits OCR'd and or use my Google Docs to open them up and do a word search. And particularly when attorneys or experts are reading from voluminous documents and you're trying to find the phrase that they use so that you make sure that your transcript is perfect, I will use those searching tools in those file folder to find the different citations that they might be saying. For instance, a couple of weeks ago, I did a deposition of an MIT chemist from Moscow. It was very difficult because he was citing lots of chemical formulas, and I was able to put just a portion of the formula in search and found the whole of the formula and have it perfect in my transcript. So using those tools, I think, is really super helpful and valuable in saving time and being more efficient and creating a more beautiful transcript.
Gosh, I remember early on how much anxiety there was from reporters who were really used to handling that paper exhibits, and in terms of like, how will I ever find that quote in this stack of electronic documents? So OCR is a great solution, Rosalie. It's kind of a modern court reporting miracle in terms of the search feature, right? And also another nod for making sure you're leveraging all of the new tools that are available out there to make our jobs easier. So that was awesome. Okay, I think we're on 6, are we? Number 6?
Number 6. And actually a reporter a couple of weeks ago called me from Florida asking what the heck she should do, wherein the attorney was talking about documents on the record, but not saying that they were an exhibit. So for instance, the attorney will say, oh, witness, here is an email. And do you recognize it? And they never say, and it's going to be marked exhibit 1 or describe it in any way. Okay. And so at the end of the deposition, the poor court reporter was going through trying to figure out which documents were exhibits, what that document exhibit number would be. It was just a mess. And she was really, she was ready to quit deposition reporting. So what I've told her that I do is I just put myself in the record and I'll write in the reporter, is this exhibit 1, counsel? And they'll say, oh, yes, of course it is. I say, thank you. And then if we get to another document and the attorney once again doesn't describe what it is other than, here's a letter. Have you ever seen this before? I will insert myself in the reporter and say, exhibit 2. And I'll keep going, exhibit 3, until the attorney gets the idea that we're trying to make a record. And also it just helps me later when I'm trying to index the exhibits. I don't have to try to figure out where they're talking about a certain document. Because I've put myself in there with the number, I can just search. And it makes it a lot easier for us after the deposition is over, just to take over, guide the attorney a little bit, help create a better record, and saving us so much time, not hunting and picking through a transcript, trying to figure out where an exhibit or a document is marked.
Oh, that is a great one. And I think one of the really important things you touched on, it's something I say all the time, one of my famous last words, if you will, it's not the why, it's the how. In other words, I think attorneys get why reporters insert themselves into the record, that we don't do it unless there's something being threatened, but the record is in jeopardy for some reason. However, they can and do get upset with the how, meaning, how you insert yourself. If they feel reporters are are admonishing them or embarrassing them in some way, especially if their clients with them. So I think they tolerate the why, and you just have to be really careful with the how. And that's a really, really important one and a great tip. So thank you for that one, Rosalie. And while this might be the last tip, I'm sure it's not the least. What's tip number 7?
Well, number 7, I learned the hard way. When I first began doing the remote depositions and marking exhibits, I would wait 6 or 7 days, hoping the attorney would email me the exhibits. During the deposition, I would leave my information in the chat box and ask them to send me the exhibits, and everybody would agree, yes, of course I will. But then it didn't happen. And then on the 7th, 8th, 9th day, it started to be a situation where I'm chasing exhibits. And so what I do now is I set up an email at the very beginning of the deposition. I invite the attorney to send me the exhibits. In the subject line, I put the name of the witness, the date, and then I write, dear counsel, I invite you to send me the exhibits that were marked at the deposition, and I very much appreciate it. And I'm finding that I usually get those exhibits the same day because I think it's all top of mind at that moment. So attorneys have the exhibits on their laptop or somewhere that it's easy for them to access. And so it's easy for them just to attach them to that email that I sent them and to send them back to me. I'm getting those exhibits the day of the deposition, which has just really been creates such a nice feeling when you don't have the stress of waiting and waiting for exhibits, particularly when it's that 10th day and you need to get the transcript in.
Well, timing is everything, they say, and that's certainly a great tip for timing. It's kind of a bummer, even if sometimes you have the transcript done and it's just sitting there waiting, and it can be maybe a little bit of one of those legal strategies to hold things up. So I love how you just get on it right away. That's a great one. They're all great. Those were all great, Rosalie. Very impressed. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing those tips and tricks with us on how to tame the beast we've come to know as exhibits in the remote realm. I think that's going to do it for us today. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
And Jan, we are off the record.
Depo Talk, Depo Talk. Another topic broken down on Depo Talk.